Today we're going to be using the Made by Mitchell curve case to underpaint. I'm going to be going in with the Made by Mitchell in the shade Light. This product is very, very pigmented. So this is not like a go big or go home product. This is something that you want to definitely build in layers. And with an underpainting technique, we're going to go in and apply all of our bronzer, blush, and concealer, and then our foundation will actually go on the top. We're going to use the cream that makeup artists use, the Embryolisse, and you're going to want a fair amount of this. As you know, if you follow me here, prepping the skin is one of the most important things that you can do if you want a flawless makeup application. Now the skin is glossy and prepped, we're ready to start our underpainting technique. With an underpainting technique, don't be afraid to have the product a little darker, because that foundation will go in and mute a lot of it out. You want proper placement. You don't want to blend it until you get to the foundation stage either. Now that I've applied my bronzer, I'm going to go in with the pinkest shade and just add that to the apples of the cheek without over blending. You're going to look a little bit like a clown with underpainting, and that's okay. Trust the process, but you can see I've added my bronzer at the top of my forehead, down the bridge of my nose, here at the cheekbone, also at the under part of my chin, but you want to look a little bit like a clown with underpainting. Now I'm going to go in with a little bit of the Jeffree Star Candy Youth because I want a really nice pink under eye. So I'm going to add that, and then I'm going to go in and apply my concealer. For concealer, I'm going to be using the Giorgio Armani Luminous Silk in shade 5.25. For concealer placement, I'm going to be adding it under the eye, down the bridge of the nose, right here, a little on the chin, and I like to do a little on the bow of the lip. Next, I'm going to take a beauty sponge and just kind of work that pink color corrector and concealer under the eye prior to adding my foundation. But you can see it's really bright. And again, with underpainting, you're going to look a little bit like a clown at this stage, and this is what you want it to look like. So with foundation, you never want to go directly on the skin. I'm going to add some of the Armani Luminous Silk also in shade 5.25 foundation, and you want to let that warm up a bit on the back of your hand. I always start with a brush, and we're just going to kind of paint that on as we normally would. And we're going to see all of that Made by Mitchell blush and cream bronzer peek through as we blend it out. But just cover your face in all the areas that you would typically add foundation, but also go over the areas where you added the bronzer and the blush. And after you have this all painted on really well, you're going to go in with a beauty sponge or blender and work it all into the skin and blend it so it's nice and beautiful. I like to go down the neck, and I treat my neck and décolleté the same as I do my face. I'm going to take my Patrick Ta sponge, and now I'm really going to just work all that foundation into the skin and buff it out so it is flawless. And as you can see, all of the underpainting that I did, I'm no longer looking like a clown. and that under eye is nice and bright. And then I'm going to be going in with all the powder forms of my blush and bronzer to set all of these cream products. Now we're ready to go in with powder products. I'm going to go in with my Tarte Park Avenue Princess bronzer and just go right over those places where I added the Made by Mitchell cream bronzer to just kind of set everything in place. And then I'm going to be using the Huda Beauty pressed powder, and I will tell you it will tone all of this way down. So don't be afraid to use product. Don't be afraid to pack it in. If you want that really professional makeup artist, professional base, don't be afraid to use product. And I always like to take my bronzer from my jawline back behind the ear. And then when you're working on your bronzer for your nose area, you want to make sure to connect your brow. That is the difference between a really professional makeup look and one that is not as professional. Now I'm going to go in with the ColourPop powder blush in a color called Woo Me, and it's just a really bright pink. And again, I'm going to go right there on the apples of the cheek and diffuse a little bit underneath the outer eye area. And now I'm going to go in with my Huda Beauty Easy Baked Pressed, and I like to use two different colors here. So the first is Cherry Blossom Cake, and I'm really going to use that to set the under eye area where I have all that beautiful blush. And you want to work it onto your beauty blender and then use your hand to kind of pat off the difference. Now that I've set the under eye area, I'm going to go in with the Sugar Cookie Translucent Setting Powder and use that for the remainder of the face. And this just kind of mattifies the skin, but look at what happens. I go from having a lot of pores to basically a filtered finish. And this is the finished result, underpainted, using the Made by Mitchell as my underpainting product. And for a setting spray, we're going to use the Danessa Myricks Blurring Balm. This is absolutely gorgeous. And we're just going to use that to set the face. And this is the result. Now I am going to work on the rest of my face, but this is the technique of underpainting, and you can see, even though I looked a bit like a clown, it now looks very flawless, very poreless, and very airbrushed.